Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Save Scumming. Thank you for tuning in. It's great to be here as always, and today we're talking about the Vampire Coast again. And specifically, by popular demand, you guys have asked, how do I economy with the Vampire Coast? And while I have not fully developed my economy, the reason I started this video is it is turn 31, the end of turn 31, and this is the first time in this campaign that I have had a positive economy since the beginning of the campaign. So now that I've gotten that sorted out of the way, as far as like a baseline expectation of, if you're being an aggressive player, what your campaign is going to look like economically for the first stage of the campaign. Now that I've got that out of the way, I can get into the rest of the video, which will be later in the campaign. So it's a little bit later in the campaign. It's currently turned 43, and I think I've developed this campaign economy enough to make it presentable so that we can discuss the strengths and the weaknesses of the Vampire Coast faction as far as the economics are concerned, and what you should be targeting, or at least in my opinion, what you should be targeting. Before we even get to any of the settlements or anything, I want to talk about broader campaign strategy, because I think it's very important for the Vampire Coast's economy that you're out there fighting battles every single turn, because they make so much money from post-battle loot and sacking and settlements. They do have an option to raise settlements for a lot of money. However, ultimately, I think that you're better off to capture that settlement after sacking it and sell it to one of the factions in the region for diplomatic reasons, as well as getting a whole bunch of money off of it. You can form those alliances and then ultimately get a whole bunch of money doing it that way. And you can do a lot of scumming when it comes to moving those settlements around. And it can also help you set up pirate codes, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But as far as the broader strategy is concerned, I'm going to be using Noctilus' faction here because this is my favorite of them. I do think that Luther Harkon starts out with a richer first province, but that's just because he's right here on the coast. And Noctilus, I think, has the ability to surpass him, especially because Noctilus has the most agency of any of the factions, because you can just pretty much do whatever you want, because you don't start out with any immediate enemies that you absolutely have to take down, because your starting province is the Galleon's Graveyard, and a lot of factions don't have vision on this. So you won't even have to really defend this until the first shanty battle comes up. But anyway, so as far as broader campaign strategy, I think that it is a mistake to go hard into Ulthuan. There's a couple different ways you can go about it. I think one of the very attractive options that I've done before is to take out Tyrion in the early stages, because you take out a big superpower next to you. But I think it's actually more beneficial to bring him on side, and you can see here that as far as my Ulthuani factions are concerned, we have a military alliance with both Etain and Yvresse, and a defensive alliance with Nagaryth. So we are, and we're not just, so that one's relatively new, but Yvresse and Etain really, really like us. And there is more that I could have done. I could, for instance, go after Grom over there and get relations. His defeat trait gives you relations, but having them on side gives you somebody to trade with, and it gives you supplemental troops and people to sell settlements to. Because holding all of this coastline against all of the enemies that could be in the region is pretty tedious. You're going to spend a lot of time playing whack-a-mole, and then you're also going to be at war with three major high elf factions that, in my opinion, especially in the early campaign, hard counter your shitty armies. So, Vampire Coast, in a long way around, is to say that they are a hit and run faction, And when you decide to pick apart Ulthuan, you should crack this nut one piece at a time. For instance, I got Yvresse and Etain to take out Avalorn for me. I didn't have to fight Alariel at all. And it was all done through diplomatic means. So there's some advanced play options that are available, provided that you don't go hard into Ulthuan. So what I would suggest, actually, is that you take this settlement and this settlement, and then take Noctilus and go right over here into the Skeggy area over here. This is the Isthmus coast. Take this province, and I'll come back to this in a minute. And the reason you want to do that is because you can have a secondary army, or group of armies, I would say, that go around the donut here all the way up to take out Nakari. And in the process of doing that, you can set up a whole bunch of these pirate coves that you can then get Etain to take. So now each of these pirate coves is producing me 10 infamy, 200 gold, research rate, and trade tariffs, 2%. So that's just from this one, that one. So 1, 2, I had one here for a while, 3, there's one here, 4, 5, 6, I was able to set up. So that's 1,200 gold per turn just happening. Now, they are expensive, 2,500. If you're going to sell it, then you need to keep this for 5 turns because it produces 200. If you sell it, then it's going to give you 1,500 back. So you have to have 5 turn completions to get its value back. I've had these since like turn 5, so they've far paid for themselves. So there is some economy to be done in Ulthuan for the opportunist that wants to take out those factions, form that diplomatic relationship with major Ulthuani factions, and then also have access to their better frontline infantry through the allied recruitment capacity. So now that we've got that sort of out of the way, as far as not going into Ulthuan, well, where else do you go? Because you should think about your settlements that you're going to take and how defensible those settlements are. So the Galleon's Graveyard, you start with it. Very defensible, almost never gets attacked. And when it does get attacked, almost every single army has to come up on the shore, and it's going to come into range. You're going to see it. You can raise an army. You can start recruiting. You can raise the dead. Like, this is a very defensible location. It's really not hard to do. Unless they march like 6 or so armies on you, then you're just going to be able to take them down. It's not a big deal to defend. But the rest of the stuff that you have is a pain in the ass to defend. Now, it's relatively easy to raise an army because you can raise dead, but you should think about which areas you want to capitalize on for those actual hard settlements that you have, because you want to have hard settlements. You just don't want them to be incoherently acquired. So, for instance, I suggest this one. This province, the Isthmus Coast, has some of the most important buildings in here for Vampire Coast because their land-based economy is absolutely awful. Let's look at their settlements. So let's start with minor settlements. Minor settlements can only make a maximum, fully upgraded to Tier 3, can only make a maximum of 60 per baseline settlement, and then their actual economy building in the region does 200. Now, there's another building in here that you can also leverage. This one, they'll give you a maximum of an additional 60 if you want to go hard into control. Control doesn't give you a whole lot of benefit when it comes to this particular faction. It doesn't help your economy or anything like that. It does help your recruitment cost, and that's about the major thing. Your campaign line of sight, I suppose, could be useful for defense, but it's not. I don't find it that impactful. Now, the thing that is important is that you look at your fully upgraded capital city. This is not a fully upgraded capital city, but a fully upgraded capital city will give you 500 So those capitals are important. You can still build those economic buildings, but the economic building for the capital produces 300 when fully upgraded. It is rather expensive to get there. But your real moneymaker is your ports. This province has 3 ports in it. A fully upgraded tier 3 port and a minor settlement is 400, 400, and then a fully upgraded tier 5 port is 800. So a lot of money can be made from this. Now, also, every port that you hold has a modifier on it for increasing the income for your ports faction wide. So having more ports equals more better, right? So build all those economic buildings, but understand that the minor settlements are almost entirely worthless unless they have a port in them. So this one's a really good one, but also in the region for coherency, you don't want to like hold this one and then have an enemy here and then hold this one that has more ports and then hold this one that you see what I mean? So what I have done here is I've just taken this whole region from Marathi and the minor factions in the region, because you also need tradable resources. So trade, if we go into our trade, I'm obviously selling off all of these, right? So you need trade partners to be able to do this. But if you look at our trade income, I'm producing almost 3,000 from trade. So that is another source that you have to consider, but you don't want to just take regions for trade resources if it doesn't have some other thing in the region. Like for instance, this one is ripe with trade resources. There are 2 resources in the region, but it's orange territory. That's not going to be worth my time. So I've sold this to the Wood Elves, formed an alliance with them. I give them a gift every once in a while to keep them happy. This now gives me tradable resources to put it back into that thing, which gives me more alliances and which...
Eager to kill with haste! Fleet Admiral! Arise to my dominion!
Sorry for the weird cut there, folks. Yesterday I played with my niece and nephew, and they're constantly vectors of disease, and I definitely caught one of their cruds. So I've been fighting it off kind of all day. But we were talking about resources and how they work for the Vampire Coast. Vampire Coast doesn't make as many resources as some other factions. Like the Dwarves will make 2 or 3 times as many bundles for each of their trade resources than the Vampire Coast. But they also get a buff for their recruitment cost, and more importantly, for every resource that you have in the region, and the resources are pretty cheap, by the way, to construct, you get a 10% construction cost reduction for all the buildings in the province. So if you got 2 resources, like we do here, cost you 20% less after you reach tier 2 for all those settlements. So that's how you're going to prioritize building them. You get this one up to tier 2, build that, get this one up to tier 2, build that, and then build the rest of the province out, because everything will be 20% cheaper. Landmarks. Landmarks are also weird. You don't make as much on the landmarks as you do in other factions for the Vampire Coast. For instance, Ancient City of Quintex. Come in here, look at this building, fully upgraded, 400. You do get some research rate and some growth and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But income from all buildings, it is a 4-settlement province, so that's impactful. But landmarks, as a rule of thumb, just aren't as good for the Vampire Coast. So the land economy, again, not that great. But when you do take those regions, you want them to be regions that are relatively defensible, because you cannot afford to have just random armies just chilling in your regions to defend those locations. You're going to have to raise a lord, raise dead on that lord, defend the location, disband it to be able to defend your stuff. And you might build some defenses in key locations, like down here at the Galleon's Graveyard, for instance. I have built defenses here just to aid a little bit, so I don't have to do quite as much raise the dead. That means I don't have to keep quite as much in the bank turn to turn in case something pops up. So you take very little territory and make sure that it's territory that is easily defensible. So, for instance, this one, 2 ports in this region, 2... resources in this region or in this province. These 2 settlements are, well, that one's probably, or excuse me, Arnheim. These 2 provinces are these 2 settlements are basically worthless. They're just a buffer zone for the settlements that I actually care about, right? So but you got to think about it like this: to get to this settlement, they either have to sail all the way from here or they have to go overland. Well, if they attack this, well, then I've got basically 3 turns to raise a real army here and defend this region. So that's totally doable. So you hold these territories for defensive purposes, really. So you're like, okay, well, those are a couple settlements. Where else do you hold? Well, defensible has different modes. Right now, this is defensible because I've got friendlies on either side, and my stuff's in the center. But other regions that are very defensible are places that people just don't go. Like this one over here. There's a minor elf faction over here, and nobody goes over here. Nobody has sight on these islands, and nobody really ever comes over here. Because of that, this is prime territory for you. It also holds 3 ports in it. So this is a great region to hold because it will require basically no defense outside of keeping rebellions from happening, which don't really happen much for the Vampire Coast. This also gives you a good jumping off point here at the Tower of Stars if you want to sail north and expand into the Dragon Isles, because this is a 4-settlement province with, again, 4 ports. One of those ports, very impactful, 800 for the Sea Dragon's Teeth. So keep in mind this province for a place to expand into, but this is going to be one of the ones that you're actually going to have to defend versus this one you won't have to really defend. So now that we've gotten to, there's a few other places that I think that you ought to consider. Over here, Sartosa is a very lucrative province for you because of all the things that we've discussed previously, so you should probably take this one. It's also pretty defendable. While you're over here, you're probably going to have to defend this one, so you might as well take this stuff over here as well, because there are 2 ports in this region. This is one of the ones that generates income for you. See, it's not very good, right? But you're over here. You might as well, if you're going to take this, you might as well take these ones as well. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of ports over here that you can work yourself into after you take care of the Skaven capital. So when it comes to these, that's basically most of the hard territory that I would suggest you prioritize taking. Everything else is kind of at your discretion depending on which area you want to expand in. I personally do not like to go into Bretonnia until I've built up a fair amount of strength, because there's a lot of coastline here. Coastline is good, but coastline is also very difficult to defend in this game because they can sail armies. Depends on what you got going on in Ulthuan. Like if you go hard into here and you have wars going on in Ulthuan, then they're just going to sail over here and take your territory back. If you have a single direction of expansion being this way, then it's a lot easier to defend these regions. You might go over here, for instance, take out Grom and get some relations with the High Elves, for instance. But anyway, that's discretionary. I've shown you the major regions for capture for hard territory, in my opinion. On to pirate coves, because we touched on that earlier. You make a shit ton of money off of pirate coves. There are some very good locations. Now, we have to first familiarize ourselves with the pirate cove buildings, because there's 4 different ones. You're going to predominantly use this one, because this produces research rate and income from those trade tariffs. So whenever you get more resources, wherever you plunder and hold, at your discretion. And this one, your extra capacity for your gunnery whites and your Morn goals. Those 2. I almost never use this one, and I sparingly use this one. But when you use this one, it's important because there are some really awesome locations to put this. 2 examples that I'll show you now is one at Lothern. So this one is 653 income per turn. So it's based on 50% of the income of the settlement. This is a tier 4 settlement. It's gonna get a little bit better than that once Tyrion gets to turn 5, but by that time I'll probably have tried to engineer another war and just take that off of him outright. Depends on how that engineering goes. I might engineer it the other way and take the rest of these over here before I make my push into into Bretonia for all those ports. Or I might just skip that entirely and go set up a bunch of pirate coves up in Norska. I haven't decided which way I'm going to go with it yet. The other location that you should absolutely consider sending a hero to set up a pirate cove is Eringrad. And the reason why is because this is producing, for me, 1070 a turn. This is not a fully upgraded settlement. So it can get considerably better if Castalton can get it up to tier 5. But this is going to be very dependent on your economic situation. How you get that person up there to do it, whether you're raiding up here or you're sending a hero to set that up, because remember, you got a 15 turn cooldown to send that fleet captain up here. And it's also going to depend on who holds this settlement. If this settlement is not in Kislevite control, don't even bother. The other one that I really like to do that I have not done yet in this campaign is to send someone up here. I'll probably plunder it. Sigvald's province. Wherever he is. There's a dark fortress up here that sits on the coast. I think it's... yeah, the Fortress of the Damned right here. Sits on the coast. And it makes a fair amount of money. So you should consider that one as a good place to set up a pirate cove, but I would probably do that one by just attacking it, because there's a whole other you can basically ping pong through here and do a whole bunch of damage and build a whole bunch of those pirate coves. Other opportunities for pirate coves that you should consider are over here in Cathay. There's a lot of ports in Cathay. And what's interesting about this region is that you get here by these sea lanes. The AI currently cannot use sea lanes. So basically, you can attack all of this with impunity. If you get an army over here, you basically just go up and down the coast, and you can see here that I've done exactly that. I'm about to finish this run with this lord. He's going to attack this settlement here. And then he's basically going to start going back through here, finding ways to engineer wars and peace treaties. There are a few other places that he's going to hit, like this one. This one. There's some ports in here that are very good for setting up pirate coves by attacking them. You might consider sending a fleet captain to do the Hanyu port so that you don't have to reduce its tier so that you can make more money off of it. But really what it comes down to is when you want to do that. because I've given you a whole bunch of things to do, but there's one more thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the dynamics of the campaign. This is a shipbuilding lord. These shipbuilding lords get extra campaign movement range, and they get a pretty healthy upkeep reduction at 15% on top of everything else that they can do as a general army. This means that this army is considerably cheaper than anything else that you do. If you've got an expeditionary force, you want to make sure that that expeditionary force is one of these lords that you recruit over here. So you want to use these for those campaign lords that are going to go off and do something strange in another area. So how I got this guy over here, for instance, is I sent a lord, just a regular lord, after I finished up here in the Isthmus of Lustria, dropped him in here. He comes over here, goes all the way down to consolidate this territory here, and then he turns right back around and sails here. But before I sail back into here to get over into Cathay, I've recruited that fleet captain lord that allowed for shipbuilding. And then that allows me to do that on the cheap so that I can make effectively more money per action because I'm paying less for the actual army that's over there. So you send a bare bones army over here, you raise the dead. Once you get on land, you take this settlement, this settlement, this settlement, you turn them right back around, swap him out for a more powerful lord that has a shipbuilding, send him back to Cathay, and then you start just pillaging all of these settlements as you go up the coastline. Anyway, there was a lot in this as it pertains to the economy of the Vampire Coast, and I want to say that the Vampire Coast has probably a moderately technical presentation across the board, because it's not just standing army, super strong, march in a direction, take territory, hold territory. It's actually very much plundering, which in my opinion is very thematic. Now, I think that we've spent enough time on the technical aspects of the Vampire Coast economy. There are a few other things that I left on the table, like the rights and stuff like that, but for the most part, that covers most of the bases that are going to be the most impactful things in your campaign. If you would like another video on the campaign tactics and maybe a differential between doing something like I've displayed in this campaign and going direct Alt-1, then I will absolutely do that, or battle tactics or something like that for the Vampire Coast. And let me know, make this video popular, and I will absolutely do that thing. So thank you for tuning in to the Art of Stage Scumming. Hopefully we'll see another one here pretty soon.